First, let me just say that I too have not approved video responses and comments that were insulting, disrespectful, mocking, or misrepresenting, or from the people who I had to block for those same reasons. What I don't understand is not approving video responses that people work hard on just because I don't agree with them or can't deal with the reasoning in them. The video response that I made to Brock's video, where he tried to prove that the most important thing for a Jehovah's Witness is realizing that Jesus is the true God, blatantly and boldly contradicting John 17:3 and too many other texts to count, has gone unapproved with no reason from Brock as to why. Because he didn't approve the response, I thought I would at least leave a comment on his video letting his viewers know that I'd actually made one. And this part amazes me. He erased it, so no one would know I had made a response to his. I made it for those who watch his video to see the other side of the issue, which seems fair enough to me, and to consider reasoning that he seems to not only not recognize, but to completely avoid when it is proposed. What is so wrong with hoping people will think beyond the surface of the type of specious reasoning Brock uses to prove a Trinity? I understand that non-Trinitarians have always been censored by Trinitarians, but I had honestly hoped and even mistakenly thought that Brock was one of the more reasonable and respectful YouTube Trinitarian apologists. I'm disappointed. I even wrote Bible Thumper and asked this: why would you erase a comment where I said I made a video response to one of yours, hoping he'd at least let me know so I wouldn't have to wonder what I had done so wrong? I heard crickets. Just like I heard when I asked him reasonable, scripturally based questions that he didn't answer for whatever reason. My guess would be that because he knew that if he did answer, his serious inconsistency would be exposed for what it is. I will leave the questions here again for Brock or any other Trinitarian that insists on using the same specious reasoning even when it is proven both poor and inconsistent. Again, in Brock's video, he claims that any God besides the true God has to be a false God. What he has yet to deal with is not only the unambiguous declaration of who that true God actually and realistically is in John 17:3, yes, the Father alone, but also that even the new linguistic and exegetical key to the Greek New Testament notes about the Bible's use of true, that the opposite is not necessarily false. Instead of dealing with this, Brock says things like, "That makes no sense," in a comment he made, though I'm not sure what specifically he was talking about. I will leave you all with the questions Brock won't answer. Perhaps he will in the future. After all, we should all be able to give a good defense of our faith and answer simple questions like these. If we can't, then there may be something wrong with the doctrines that force us to avoid them or to equivocate, or to say things like, "That makes no sense." First, I'll reiterate the biblical reasoning I espoused in my last video, then on with the questions that go unanswered by Trinitarians like Brock. In my last video, I noted that Jesus is the true light, while his disciples are lights of the world. The disciples are clearly not false lights, as if their light is imaginary and somehow contemptible. They're simply types of the true light. Not the true light, but not false either. In Hebrews 9:24, we have the true temple in heaven. The one on earth isn't false, but it isn't the true temple either. So apparently, again, just like Bible scholars note in regard to the Bible's use of true, as opposed to Bible Thumper's use of true, it is true that the opposite is not necessarily false. So why does Bible Thumper say that it has to be? As if it somehow proves Jesus has to be a false God, if he isn't the only true God. And again, who did Jesus say was the only true God? In John 17:3. Simple enough question, I would say. Why doesn't why doesn't he deal with questions like, Bible Thumper, are you a false light of the world just because you aren't the true light? Was the earthly temple a sham and a fake just because it was only a model of the true temple? Brock also made this comment: so Jesus is a type of the real God, even though he says he's the gate, and he also says nobody comes to me except the Father who draws them. Sounds like a type, all right. So I'll ask again. Why does the fact that God gave Jesus sheep and made Jesus Lord mean that Jesus must be added to the substance of the one who gave him everything he has? I ask this one because Brock seems to think that going to Jesus as the gate somehow means he's God. No, it means that the man, Jesus Christ, is mediator between the one God and men. 1 Timothy 2:5 is another great inspired creed. It means Christ was given authority by the one God. God doesn't have a God nor have to be given a thing by someone else. He calls his own God greater and the only one true. If God gives you a kingdom, it doesn't mean that because you've been given a kingdom that you're then God. If God gives you sheep, it doesn't mean that because you've been given sheep that you then become the God who gave them to you. Nonsensical, really. Likewise, if God gives you authority, that has to mean you're not God. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to be given authority. In the past, I've even referred people to Bibl3thumper's videos where he tries to reason with Jehovah's Witnesses. I won't be doing that anymore because, much like the Jehovah's Witnesses, he can't seem to deal with easy biblical reasoning because he's fallen for the specious reasoning of men while managing to censor someone who exposes why it's specious and inconsistent.